So tell me what you're thinking of. Show me how to get love. So tell me what you're thinking of. Show me how to get love, love, love. Show me how to get love. So tell me what you're thinking of. 'Cause I won't be your friend. Show me how to get love. So tell me what you're thinking You show me how to get love. So tell me what you're thinking
All right, we are live. I had some small problem with the intro video, but I hope that didn't cause any problem to anyone. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. Thanks for joining our streaming today. I'm pretty excited because this is the first technical streaming I'm doing on this channel. I had the live stream more or less a month ago together with Anthony Borton, in which we talked about GitHub and if GitHub is secure and safe. But this is the first technical live stream I'm doing, so I'm pretty excited about that. Some little housekeeping. First of all, feel free to ask questions in the live chat. I will try to keep an eye on the chat while I'm building the GitHub Actions workflows. Try to keep the questions related to what what I'm showing, or anyway related to GitHub Actions. But if I have time at the end of the stream, when I finish building everything, I will try and reply the other questions that are not related to GitHub Actions, etc. That said, today we are going to build some GitHub Actions workflow for a real project that I have on GitHub, and I'll introduce the project in a second. And what I want to do today is not only do the CI part, but also the CD. So I'm going to deploy the application. In this case, it's a web application. In my case, I'll deploy it to App Service on Azure. But most of the things I will walk you through, and most of the things we will see, basically will apply to any kind of deployment, because I will try to point out also tips and tricks and best practices for when it comes to CI of containers, for example, that we will see, deployment, and GitHub Actions in general. All right, before we start, just let me roll the intro video for 5 seconds and then we start. All right, so here you can see my GitHub repo. This is the project we will be working on. It's an ASP.NET Core website, or web application, but it will not matter more than enough, because we're going to build it as a container. So we have in here the Docker file, as you can see, and if I go in here, the Docker file is a very standard one, just grabbing the base image, using the SDK, publishing the application, and creating it into the container image itself. And we will use this then to do all the other stuff we have to do with CI CD. This project is a rare project of mine. I haven't updated it in a while, but it's basically a website that helps you compare all the container services that are present in Azure, whether you want to use AKS, Upservice, and many others. I didn't update this in a while. In fact, you can see there's still like Service Fabrics mesh, which doesn't exist anymore. So I want to retake this project into my hands and re-update it. But before doing that, of course, the first step is more automation, and this is what we're trying to achieve today. I'll walk you through all the different steps while we do it. But yeah, that's basically the whole purpose of today. As I was saying, I will keep an eye on the live chat. So let me know if everything's okay, and if you have any questions related to this. All right, so let's start. And of course, I want to create, as I mentioned before, a GitHub action. And for the first part, I want to do the CI. I will focus on the CI. And as I mentioned, this is a containerized application. So I'm not gonna, create everything from scratch. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, because I know that GitHub Action has a starter workflow for working with containers. So what I will do is going down here and search for the Docker starter template, which is one thing. It's you need to remember is that most of the time these actions actually change position, so it's fairly difficult to find it at a first glance. But here's the one I'm gonna use. Actually, no, this is not the one I'm gonna use, because this is publishing the Docker image to GitHub packages, and I'm not gonna do that. So let me just search for Docker. GKE Docker image. Here you go. So this is the starter workflow that I'm gonna use. It's a very straightforward kind of action workflow, and we will use this as starter template, as in fact it's called. So let's give it a proper name. We will use this for doing CI CD. So let's call it Docker CI CD, and also the name over here, Docker CI CD. So first thing I always do on my actions whenever I'm developing them is adding the workflow dispatch trigger, which allows you to start this action workflow manually if you need to. So this is the very first thing I normally do. We can leave the trigger on push and pull requests, because we're gonna use it in throughout this live. I'm gonna change the name of the job. So if you don't know how actions work, we have the trigger section and then we have the job section, and you can have one or more jobs. In my case, I will end up probably with like 2 or 3 jobs. So I want to be able to separate them, as a first glance. So what I'm gonna do, I'm renaming this. This is the name, the internal name, if you will, and then I'm gonna give it friendly name like build container image. This is what will be shown on our actions when we'll run. So what this action does is basically just checking out the code. Oh, okay. Ian has a question, is which action did you start? I start with the Docker image starter template, not with the published Docker image, because that one is published into GitHub packages, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the Azure Container Registry today. So I just started with the Docker image. It's just called Docker image. All right, so going back to our workflow, what I was doing, so we have the runs on. One thing, another thing that I'm gonna do here is if we go back to the source code, you can see that the root of my repo doesn't contain the project file or any source code, but everything is inside this Azure Containers website. So this is actually my, if you will, working folder, and in fact my Docker file is in this folder. So to avoid to having to specify that directory in every single step, what I'm gonna do is in this very job change the defaults. There's this keyword part of the syntax of GitHub Actions that allows you to specify some default values for a job or even the entirety of jobs. If I would put this default clause over here before jobs, that would apply to every single job. I'll tell you later why I don't want to apply this to every single job, but for the time being, just take my word for it, and let's put the defaults in this job, and we add the run, meaning that these defaults will apply to all the run of the steps basically in it. And the clause is, the keyword is working directory, and then it was Azure Containers website, if I'm not wrong. It's Azure Containers website. So with these, all the steps below will basically use these as working directory. Another thing, of course, that I want to change is the file. The name of the Docker file is right. I just use Docker file. Of course, I want to change the name of my image. To do so, I'm going to use the environment variable. And I'm going to create one called image name. And for this very demo, what we need to do, this is my Azure Container Registry in Azure. And you can see that my repository is called Azure Containers website, because I have a lot of imagination. So I try to call everything exactly the same. So this is basically the name of the repo I'm going to use. So my image name over here will be this Azure Container website. And I'm also creating another one, which is image tag. And for this, I don't want to use the date as the default starter template, but I'm going to use another one, which is the GitHub Run ID. So the GitHub Run ID, if you're not familiar with that, is a variable that is already present. Sorry, I had a typo over here. That is already present in GitHub, and basically it's a unique ID among all the actions you have. So this will ensure that these will be unique through different executions. And it is incremental, so you know already that if you have an image with a tag that is a higher number than before, that's more recent. I don't necessarily like the date. I know that's there are good arguments in using dates as image tags, but for me, I prefer using run IDs or other like build ID, etc. The reason why I'm using the variable in the environment variables is that because I want to be able to reuse those values through my workflow. So all I have to do in here is changing these to be $image underscore name column $image image underscore tag. And this basically will reuse the value we have in our environment variables in the image. I've seen there's another question from Ian. Why are you using workflow dispatch? I'm using workflow dispatch because I want to be able to, since I'm developing this action, I want to be able to kick it off manually rather than just in pull request or push. And workflow dispatch allowed me to trigger the action manually. That's the reason why. So let's go back to the workflow. So in this moment, we check out the code and we build the image. I would say that for the time being, when it comes to CI, we basically have done almost everything we have to, if you will. If you follow me and for a while, you know that this is not my favorite way to do CI. Let me commit, so we will start the CI, and then I'll explain you what I do for workflow. Remember to always use a meaningful commit message whenever you try to commit anything in Git. So while this is doing its own things, let me explain why I don't normally do the build this way. And I know that 99% of the examples you find online are done like this. And there are arguments again for this one, but the way I normally like to do CI, even for containers, is building the application outside of the image, and then just pack the resulting binaries or the resulting artifacts inside the image. Now, people normally say that this will compromise the repeatability and will take away something from the containers. One of the reasons why people do containers or work with containers is they want to be able to basically have the same result whenever they build the image on their laptop or in the production environments. However, and that's true. However, if you use a CI CD system, which is like Actions, or which is kind of standardized, you achieve the same result. I don't want to go too much in depth in this. If you're interested in how I do CI for my Docker images, you can go back in my channel history. I think it's probably the first or the second video I've published. So I apologize for the quality. It's not super high, but I have an entire video just talking about this. So let's go to our actions, and this apparently this has completed, and our build has been successful, and we've created the image. Right, so let's go back to our GitHub action workflow. And by the way, I'm doing this in the GitHub interface just because there is the IntelliSense, and I think for like a demo purpose, it's quite good. I would normally do this in something like VS Code because it's a little bit more flexible, but this works. So, all right, now we have our image, and no, I'm not gonna push it now to a container registry. In fact, if you see here, you'll see that I didn't specify the name of a container repository. I've in fact omitted that because I want to do a different thing. And again, I have an entire video about this. I will explain just the very bare minimum in a moment. But what I want to do now is, instead of pushing this to an Azure Container Registry, I want to save these as an artifact for my CI. Like what you would do if you would not be working with a container image. If you would be working with a normal application, you will end up having some binaries and some artifacts as a result of your CI, of your build. And so what you would do is publishing those binaries as artifacts for your CI, whether it's Azure pipelines, whether it's GitHub Actions like in this moment, or Jenkins or whatever. You will use some sort of artifact, and this is exactly what I want to do. I will explain you in a second why I do this, but let me show you how I do it. So first thing we need to do is save the image as a tar file, and this is why this is because if you work with Docker, you know that a Docker image in this state, when it's created, when it's built, it's some sort of, it's everywhere in the system. It's inside the Docker cache, it's inside the Docker registry itself. So it's not a single file. And to publish something as an artifact, you need to have a single file or a set of files that are, you know where they are. Docker luckily has something for us. And in fact, there is a command, let me give this a name, let's call it save image as tar. And there is, what happened? Okay. There is this docker save command that basically take everything that made an image and save it in a single file. The syntax for it is just docker save, you give it an output file name. Now for the output, I'll be using these, and you give it the actual image you're trying to save. So the image is exactly the same as before, right? Is the $image name and column $image tag, which identify the image we just built at the previous step. As an output, I want to save it in a path that I can, I can explore with a name that I am aware of. So I'm using this syntax in which I'm going to use the github.workspace, which once again is a predefined variable in GitHub that basically identify just the root folder of your GitHub repo inside GitHub Actions. And again, the image name is the same image name. So I'm creating a file. If you see, I'm formatting basically this string using the GitHub workspace as a base folder and the image name as name of the tar file. And I'm using this syntax here with the dollar parentheses because sometimes, and I have to be honest, I don't really know, even though I'm working with this every single day, I haven't identified a specific pattern why sometimes the dollar works or doesn't work. And especially when there is slashes and points and so on and so forth, I prefer having something that is error proof. So in this case, with the dollar parentheses, you can basically have an expression. And in fact, I'm using the format function here to format this string with these parameters. And of course, when you use the dollar parentheses, you cannot use anymore just the name itself of the environment variable, but you need to tell GitHub where that variable comes from. And in this case is from env because it's an environment variable. So this command, just to make it very simple, will save whatever image with whatever tag you give it to whatever name of file you give it. And the -o is just output. And this is for saving the image to a tar file. And I haven't told you yet why I do this, because I wanna talk about this while this will execute, and that will be a little bit clearer. And then again, I wanna save this as an artifact. So I'm gonna go here, and it's already here as a suggestion in the marketplace. This upload a build artifact. We select the version, and we can just copy the whole snippet and paste it here. We all know that YAML is picky with formatting. And we just need to basically give a name to the artifact. Let's call it Azure Container Website ACW image. And we also need to tell the action what file or files we want to save. In this case, we're going to use just this path, because that is basically the result image of, the result file of the docker save command. All the rest we can skip. You can, customize the behavior of this action, but for the time being, this is all I need. I have a question again from Ian. He said, trying to follow along, running into an issue. What are the preset up steps? I forked your repo. No such file direct. Did you use the working directory into the defaults? Because if not, this will save an image in another path. So let me know if that solves. If you see here, I've used the defaults with the run and specifying the working directory as where the Docker file basically is. All right, so we have basically all we need. So to recap, we built a Docker image that we've done already before. We save it as a tar file and we upload it as an artifact. As you can see here, I'm not pushing that directly to an Azure container registry. And while this builds, I'll explain you why. So let's say second phase artifact. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention in the beginning, but if you're watching this after the live, if you watch this recorded, you will have in the video description all the references of what I'm talking about, like the videos I mentioned before and the video I'm about to mention, and also the timestamps for the different phases that we are going to go through. This is the second phase, uploading an artifact, and then we will deploy, etc., etc. So going back to this, why I'm using this approach, why I'm saving this as a tar and uploading as an artifact rather than pushing it directly to our repo, so to our registry. So once again, I have a whole video about this, and it's one of the first I published on the channel. So if you go back in the history of the channel, you search for, I think it's called like, we're doing it wrong, how to do CD for containers correctly. I'll explain this in greater details, but the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to keep CI separated from CD, and to me, pushing anything to something external to a CI system is in fact CD. You're deploying something, especially when it comes to container images. So this is the first reason I want to keep the things separated. So I will have now another job, another step that will publish that image as, to a container registry. The second thing is that I want to ensure consistency. What I mean by this is that in a normal scenario, if you just push this to a registry, what you would do is whenever you need to move, for example, from dev to QA or from QA to production or anything like that, you would need to pull a container image from, let's say, the QA registry and push it to the prod registry. And this is very dangerous, if you will, because you're not 100% sure you're using the same image. Because as you probably know, unless you enforce some policies, and not all the registry allow you to enforce those kind of policies. Unless you do so, you will be able, you can change the image, you can push another image using the same tag, and if someone else does that, you may not be aware of that. So you may pull an image 123 thinking that is the same image 123 that you've used, but in fact it's a different one. So to avoid all of those things, I want to save the image as an artifact because artifacts are completely immutable. So when I do that, I'm sure that the artifact in the CI system will be always the same, and I then will push directly from the CI system that image to whatever registry, prod, dev, QA, you name it. In the meantime, this has completed. As you can see, we have all the step green, and we do have our artifact here, which is the container image we've just created. So now basically we are done with CI, and we can go on and basically create the CD part. So let's go back to our workflow. And for the, let's edit. So for the third step, for the CD, I'm gonna use a different job. So let's call it deploy to dev. Once again, this will be, no, I don't like with the underscores, so let's use the dashes. We'll give it a name and deploy to dev, runs on because it's mandatory, and we use again Ubuntu latest. We're not going to get some defaults here. We don't need a working directory anymore because we do have, sorry, my bad. I put this in the wrong spot. I have some problem in scrolling on the editor, online editor here. All right, so now it's in the right spot. Of course, we need to execute this only after we have the image. So we need to add these needs and the name of this job, which is build image. And if you don't know what needs does, it's quite self-explanatory, but basically tells this job that it needs to wait for whatever other job you put in here. In this case, as I mentioned, we need the image to be built and published as an artifact before we can actually deploy to dev. So we need to wait for this job to finish first. And since I'm going to deploy, I want to use the new environment section that, or environment clause that has been introduced. So I'm gonna use environment, and I've already created an environment called dev. And if we go to the settings, we can see that because we can go to environments. And as you see, I've created a dev environment. You can always create any environment just clicking on new environment, given that you have the permissions to do so. And you can create a new environment and set up everything, required reviewers, wait timers, secrets, and so on and so forth. And we'll go back to this in a second. Right. I don't only want to use the dev environment or environment. And the reason why I want to do this is because I will have different secrets in different environments. I will have the, maybe the Azure subscription for dev, another Azure subscription for production, or maybe I have different kind of permissions and then I want to use. So it's a good idea to do so. But also another good thing is that the environments allow you to specify an URL that you can then reuse in your workflow. So in this case, this website is published on this URL. So I'm just gonna copy this here, and we will see in a moment what this does in our workflow. So, all right. So what do we need to do? We need to first, of course, use the steps keyword to start our job. So first thing we need to do is downloading the build artifact. So once again, I can go here, and again, we have this download build artifact already suggested by GitHub Actions. So I'm just gonna select the version. I normally use the latest version for all of these, and I'm gonna paste it just right here. A little bit of formatting, and here all I need to do is basically give the name of the artifact. The artifact we created before is named ACW image, so I'm just gonna copy and paste it over here, and that's it. I don't want to save it in any strange path. If you don't specify a path, this will just sometimes these messages appear. This will just save it in the basically in the GitHub workspace. But also, let me show you another cool thing. So let me give this step an ID, like download image. An ID is a unique name that you can give to any of your steps if you want to reference that step for any reason in a subsequent step or job. So in this case, I'm giving this unique name. And when I do so, I would be able to do something cool that I will show you in a second. So we have downloaded our basically tar file we've created. Now it's time to rehydrate that image so Docker can basically use it to do whatever you want to do. So again, for this, we have a Docker command that we can use, like let's call it rehydrate the image. And we're gonna use the Docker image, the Docker load command, which accept an input, and the input, and this is the cool thing I wanna show you, is the output of this job over here. So I'm gonna use the similar command from before, in which I used the format expression, but instead of using GitHub Workspace, I'm using these steps dot let's change the name. So this is the name, the ID you use over here. So it will be steps.downloadImage.outputs, and then you can use download path, which is an output parameter that this very job expose to any of the jobs after it. So in this way, I'm 100% sure that I'm using the right folder to load my image. Now, if you remember before, I said when I was building the build image job, I said I'd put the defaults and the working directly just in this job rather than putting it on top of the job clause. And the reason for that is if you do so, this will apply to every single job. And for this job is not a problem because this folder actually exists. It exists because we have this actions checkout that checks out my repo and create the whole structure. However, if you try to use this folder in this job, for example, where we do not have the checkout, something weird happened because the download artifact will not give you any error. It will tell you that it downloaded the artifact in basically the GitHub workspace / your working directory, which remember doesn't exist, but it doesn't give you an error. And the result of that is that it doesn't actually download anything in that directory because that directory doesn't exist. So be very aware of this. If you use the working directory in outside of the job, so applying that to all jobs, remember that that may cause you some headache because especially with a download build artifact, I don't know if it's a bug, it probably is. I don't think it's a desired behavior, but in this moment, if you try to download something in a path that doesn't exist, it doesn't give you an error. And then you will have an error when you try to rehydrate the image or do whatever else with your artifact because you cannot find that file or folder. All right, that said, we have downloaded the artifact, we have the image, we rehydrated the image. So at this point, we should have our image in the Docker cache. This is finally time to push our image to the container registry. Now, to do so, once again, we can go over here in the marketplace and let's search for Azure Container. And we do have these, here we go, Azure Container Registry login. You need to use this because Azure Container Registry, of course, is a private registry, and therefore you need to log into it. Once again, we can just copy all of these, paste it here, and this needs three parameters: the username, the password, and the basically URL of the server. Now, the username, if you're familiar with the Azure Container Registry, is basically just the name of the registry. So this would be Azure Containers website. The passwords instead, I've already created it. And in fact, if we go back to our environments, you can see that I do have two secrets in here. The ACR password, that is the password of the Azure Container Registry, and some Azure credentials that we will use in a second. The only reason why I've created this beforehand is that I didn't want to create live the secrets and perhaps having someone using them. So I had to do this beforehand. And again, I use that in the environments because, as I mentioned before, I will have different container registry for different environments. So this allowed me to differentiate between them. All right, so to access that password, I will just use the $parentheses secrets.acr password. And here I have to use the these pop-up things are really annoying. I have to use the $parentheses syntax, otherwise this will not work. And for login server, let me create another variable over here. I'll call it ACR_name. And that name of the Azure Container Registry is actually, let me find it. Well, I can use actually this one, and it's this one, Azure Containers website.azurecr.io. So I can copy that, put it in here. So I save that in my environment variable, and then I can use it over here as $parentheses env.acr_name. All right, so this should make me log in to my Azure Container Registry. And so now I can actually push the image to this container registry. Before pushing though, we need one more thing, which is we need to retag the image for using it with the ACR. And this is because, as I said before, when I save the image over here, let me show you again, I'm just tagging it just with the image name and image tag, and the image name, as you can see, is just Azure Containers website. To push to a registry, you need to use the name of the registry, the full name of the registry in the image name. So at this point, I need to retag it for that purpose. So I can use the docker image tag command, and I'm gonna use this image_name column image_tag. This is the source. So I'm retagging this image with $ACR_name slash, and again, the image name and the image tag. This will just rename basically the image we have, adding the container registry name that we have in these other variable. And finally, now we can push the image. Once again, name push image to ACR, run docker push. Sorry, my bad. This is just docker tag, and this should be docker image push. And we use, again, the full name, and this will, or should at least, push our image to the container registry. If I've done everything correctly. Let's see if this works. Let me comment, and then I'll make a comment. Let's call it phase 3 push to ACR. As you can see, if you're familiar with, for example, Azure pipelines, you will see that here things are fairly different, because for common or base level commands, like the Docker commands, for example, I'm using the command line, right? I'm using the Docker image push, Docker tag, all the Docker commands directly. In other CI systems, like, for example, Azure pipelines, you have more, I would say, custom or pre-built tasks or steps that are a little bit more user-friendly, but they rely on someone maintaining those things for you, unless you want to create it yourself. The GitHub Action philosophy is slightly different. We have, of course, third-party actions or first-party actions, like the download build artifact and login to Azure Container Registry, that makes simpler for the users to do the different operations. However, for most of the things, especially, as I said before, the common or simple things like tagging a Docker image or build a Docker image, this is what we have. So let's go back to our actions. This is still building. It's saving the image as a tar. You can see here that we currently don't have visualized the second step, the second job, because since it needs this job to be finished, it's not shown that. It's not shown yet. And in fact, should this step fail, we will just see that step skipped. If you hear some background noise, unfortunately, my neighbors have a new dog, and it's pretty noisy sometimes, and this is one of the time, because of course I'm doing a live, so it has to be noisy, right? All right, the build container image job has completed, and now the deploy to dev job is running. So we've downloaded the image, it's rehydrating. Well, it's been pretty fast. Let me show you the container registry repository. As you can see, I still have only the older one. This is being published in 2018. Let's try to refresh, and there we go. We have the new image that is pushed just right now. It's 10:15 p.m. my time, and this is what we see. Right, and in fact, if we go back, we can see that everything is green. And one thing I mentioned before, we used that environment not only for using the specific secrets, but also because we can reuse the URL. And in fact, you can see here the URL. Now, we haven't actually published that image to the actual app service, which is the destination where I have my container running. But when you do so, you will be able to reuse that so you can visit your actually website. Good question from Ian. So he said that tag, can you talk about how to make a git commit or SHA-1 or anything? Well, that would be fairly straightforward. So if I go back to my workflow, you can see here I use image tag that comes from just an environment variable that is set by GitHub. However, you can create and change the variables as you please. So what I would do, for example, if you want to use git commit or SHA-1 or anything that you can generate as part of your workflow, I would have here another step somewhere before building the Docker image to somehow generate that image tag, getting the git commit or whatever else you want, and use that, basically set that as an environment variable or an environment variable value, and then reuse that in your workflow. So that's the way I would do it. Right, so we're almost there. We have our image built. We have it deployed to the Azure Container Registry. The last thing we have to do is updating this website using the new image. As I mentioned, this website is hosted on Azure WebApp for containers. I didn't do many different things. The only difference you may notice after we deploy the new version is that if you see down below, it's pretty small, but it says 2018 because this is the last time I've updated this website. So what I've done is changing that to the current year, 2021. So when we finally deploy the website, you will see the new year popping up. Right. So let's finish this thing. So I will. What should I do? Should I reuse the same job? Yeah, I'm deploying to dev. Let's continue with the same job. Let's not create a new one. So once again, as I said, the container needs to be deployed to the to our Azure web app. Hi, DevOps Directive. Nice to see you here. We need to deploy this to Azure web app. So what we need to do is two things. We need to log into Azure and then, of course, publish this to the Azure web app as part of the process. Now, there is, if you search for Azure web app, you can see here there's this action, and I can actually copy it because anyway I'm gonna use it in a moment. And you can see that one of the, I hate these pop-ups coming up. One of the parameters is this publish profile. And that tells you that you don't actually, why it keeps scrolling wrongly. Sorry guys. I have this problem with the scroll, that when I scroll it doesn't necessarily go to the end of the file for some reason. So let's change this to deploy to Azure web app. As I was saying, you can specify the publish profile, and publish profile is one of the ways you can deploy to Azure. But for what I normally like to do is, instead of using the publish profile, because it doesn't give you enough flexibility and security, what I normally try to do is using the service principal, which you can generate and create with many scopes. You can use the entire subscription, or even a single resource group or a single resource. And that's what I try to do. So to do that, anyway, you need to, you need to use another action, which is Azure login. And this will basically cache, if you will, the credential and the login to your Azure subscription, resource group, or whatever else you want to use. Now, be careful, because this comment here is actually misleading. If you just execute this command to create your service principal, things will end up not working, because you need to use instead, let me paste it. You need to use this command over here. It's damn pop-ups. It's basically the same command, but you need to add this --sdk-auth. And this creates your service principal with more fields in the JSON. And that is what you need to use this Azure login. So in fact, if you go to the marketplace listing, they have this full command, but for some reason in the comments, they just have the wrong one. I have this full command in the video description, and there's also the link to this repo, so you can go back at any time and see this whole file created. Now, for the purpose of this video, the only thing I need is the credentials. And again, if we go back to our environments, these are saved in the Azure credential secret in my dev environment. So I've created that beforehand with this exact command, and I need to preface if this doesn't make me mad. Secrets.azure credentials. All the rest we don't need. We don't need a PS session for this purpose. The environment is by default Azure Cloud. We are not trying to deploy to Azure China or anything else, and we do have the subscription in that service principal. So that's it. This action will, as I mentioned, log into Azure for the CLI, for the basically SDK usage. And that allows us to deploy, which I misspelled, our container to our Azure web app. Right, so first thing, what we need to deploy. We need to deploy to my Azure web app, which is called, it's called Azure Containers. So let me copy this. And this is just the name of the web app that we need to use over here. We don't need a publish profile. I don't have any slot. I don't have packages because this would be for the normal web app, but we are using Azure Web Apps for containers. And then it's here where we use the full name. So once again, since we have all the variables, we can use something like this, in which we go and format the ACR name, the container registry name we used before, the image name we used before, the image tag, and we can remove all the rest because we do not need it. And that's basically all we need. So let me start and commit. This will be like phase 4, final deploy. Usually when I say final, it's never final because it's probably I misspelled something or whatnot. But if, let's see, it should work. If we go back to review what we've done, we've started with the Docker image starter template, and we heavily changed that. We use environment variables over here. We implemented a CI job that builds a Docker image, saves it as a tar file, and upload it as a build artifact in our workflow. And as I mentioned, we've done that for enforcing consistency. Then we created the deploy job. We created the environment. We saved our secrets for this environment in the actions environment. We downloaded the build artifact. We rehydrated the image, so we now have it as a proper Docker image in this actions runner. We've logged into the Azure Container Registry. We've retagged the image so we are able to push it to that registry. We actually pushed it to the registry. And now the latest things we've added is we've logged into Azure using the service principal. Remember once again to create that with the --SDK-auth flag. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And we use the Web Apps deploy action from Microsoft directly to deploy to my Azure Containers web app for container. And we use this to specify what image, which once again is just the name of the container registry, the name of the image, and the tag. Let's see how things are going. It's still doing it. Okay, the build is just completed. Let's go to our deployment job. And this should start in a moment. As we've seen before, the actual rehydration download first rehydration, logging and everything, it's pretty fast. It's already pushing, in fact, the image to the container registry. And in fact, if we go back to our container registry, these should be repositories. These should be here, not yet. Why is it not there yet? Still pushing. For a moment, I got scared that things were not working. It's taking quite long to push it for some reason. There must be some networking thing going on. Let's see. There we go. We have our new image over here. Let's switch now to the app service. And let's see the container settings. Let's see if there is any log. There is some logs. I think this is the one before. 4, I think. I don't know if it's, no, this should be right now, because yeah, the job has completed, and we've deployed. As you see here, is small, but it says deployment passed, and we're starting up service. So let's see if it actually completed. Not yet. Refresh the logs. It's probably still decompressing the image. It's almost there. So yeah, now it's loading. I don't know if you can see, it's small over here, but it's loading. And as I mentioned before, the only difference will be that here we would have the year 2021. Let's see. And here we go. Here we have the year 2021. So I think we are good for today. Very last thing I want to show you is, you know, right now we just deployed to dev. Should I want to deploy to another kind of environment? Of course, we would have the production environment and whatnot, but we can try and simulate that. I'm not gonna save these, but one thing that if I would have this deployed to production, one thing I want to make sure is that I deploy to production only code that is actually meant for production. And there are many ways to do so, but the way I like doing it is having a conditional and make sure that, for example, I don't deploy to production or to any other environment that is not supposed to be deployed to from a pull request. And again, there's many ways to do so, but the way I normally use, and it's not right and wrong, it's just, I guess, out of what you're used to, is having this conditional and make sure that this job is executed only when the changes or the either the push or the pull request merge and whatnot comes from main. Once again, you can check if it's not a PR. You can have any other conditionals you want, but this is the way I do it. So I want to show you this because I often have this question from clients and friends and say, how can you make this happen only if a certain condition happen, like it's coming from main and so on and so forth. Well, this is the way. All right, so let's see. Do we have any question? Hey, thanks to be here. I don't think we have any other question right now in the chat. When I was talking about the dog, Ian asked what kind of dog my neighbors have. I actually have no idea. I don't think there is a specific breed. It's just it's just a dog. It's a noisy dog. DevOps directive said that he normally uses this push branches main, and yeah, I do the same. But for example, now I don't know why, again, it doesn't scroll up. Let me cancel this. I do the same, but I normally tend to use the same CI workflow or the same workflow for both. Sorry, I don't think you can see it. This one. I normally use the same workflow for both push and pull requests, because in general you would need to do more or less the same things, and I then differentiate in the jobs or in the steps themselves. So if there is any job or steps that I want to do only if it's a pull request, I do that way. If, like, for example, deploying to production, I necessarily want to have only from main. The people maybe want to have that from release branch or whatever you want to call it. So I enforce that. Of course, there are scenarios in which you may want to have different workflows between pull request push to main and whatnot. But I normally tend to keep everything together. Yeah, no worries. Thanks for joining, by the way. So yeah, that's my reasoning. But again, even if you want to use different workflows, and if you have a valid reason to do so, that makes perfectly sense, and that works as well. All right. So, any other question? Let's see. I will wait about 5 minutes if there's any question. If not, we will close the stream. As I mentioned, now it's 10:30 p.m. my time here, and I had a fairly long day. But again, I'm more than happy to answer questions if you guys have any. Italian Fine Art, thank you. You're very welcome, and thanks for joining the streaming. Again, that was directed. Great stuff. Have a great day. Have a good day, you too. That was a nice job. Thanks to you for joining. Hopefully this has been helpful. I enjoyed doing these kind of things. I probably can do more in the future. If you guys like, let me know in the comment section below if you want to have more of these live streamings, if you like them, and what you think about that. I'm more than happy to try also different time. I know that it's difficult to find a time in which all the time zones can join. Maybe next time I'll try to do it in my morning, so I can still address US and maybe Australia. Maybe not Europe. I don't know if there's anyone from Europe currently in the streaming, but I will try to experiment with different timing. All right. As I mentioned before, you have all the links in the video description for the videos I've mentioned about CI CD of containers, about the other things. You have the link to this very repo, so you can go back and check the workflow, you check the code, you can do whatever you want. As I mentioned, I will update soon this whole thing, because as you've seen, I didn't update it from quite a long time, from 2018. So I'm gonna take this up again, and the code may change, but probably the CI CD part will remain more or less the same. I may add a few things. One thing I didn't mention in here at all is any security scanning. That it's very, very important. So that will be in the workflow for sure. I just didn't have enough time now to make that part as well. So go there and check this out. Let me know again in the comment section below what you think about this format. If you want more, if you want something different, if you have any question, if you're watching this when recorded, feel free to ask me anything in there if you have any question. And with this, I think I will end the streaming, and I thank you all once again for being part of this. I'll see you in the next one, and hit the like button below, subscribe if you haven't already, and have a good night or good day, depends where you are. Bye.